we were four guys. We had rows. It never got in the way of the music, no matter how bad the row was. Once the counting, we all gave our best.
At 85, Ringo Starr is still standing, still performing, and still carrying the legacy of one of the greatest bands in music history. But behind the smile, the applause, and the legendary career, there are growing concerns that many fans may not know about. From painful childhood illnesses and personal struggles to heartbreaking losses, family troubles, and battles that nearly changed his life forever, Ringo's journey has been far from easy. As the years pass, many people are beginning to wonder what the future holds for the beloved Beatles drummer. So, what is really happening with Ringo Starr at 85? Join us to find out. Ringo Starr's trademark dispute. Even after decades in the spotlight, Ringo Starr has continued to protect the name and reputation he spent a lifetime building. One notable legal dispute arose when he challenged the registration of a product name that he believed was too similar to his own well-known identity. The issue centered on a product called Ring-O. Ringo Starr argued that the name closely resembled his famous stage name and could easily create confusion among consumers, because his name had already been established and protected as a trademark. He believed that allowing another product to use a nearly identical name could lead people to assume there was a connection when none actually existed. At the time, Ringo's legal team expressed concern that the public might mistakenly think he was involved with the product or had approved it. They argued that the similarities between the names were significant and that many people could associate the brand with the legendary musician. Since Ringo had carefully developed his public image over many years, he wanted to ensure that his name remained separate from products with which he had no involvement. The disagreement eventually became a formal trademark challenge. His lawyers maintained that the appearance, pronunciation, and overall impression of the product name were too close to the name Ringo. They feared that consumers might believe the product represented a new business venture connected to the former Beatles drummer. For Ringo, the concern was not simply about a name. It was about protecting the reputation he had built throughout his career. As one of the most recognizable musicians in the world, his name carried significant value. Any misunderstanding involving that identity had the potential to affect how the public viewed him and his brand. Rather than continuing through a lengthy legal battle, both sides eventually reached an agreement. As part of the settlement, the companies involved agreed to take steps that would reduce the possibility of confusion between the product and the musician. The agreement established clear guidelines regarding how the product name could be used. The companies accepted restrictions designed to keep the brand separate from Ringo Starr's identity. They also agreed to avoid actions that might create the impression that he was connected to, endorsed, or supported their products in any way. In addition, the companies pledged not to use his name, image, or reputation in a manner that could damage, diminish, or misrepresent his public standing. They further agreed not to make references or suggestions linking the product to the musician. With these conditions in place, Ringo withdrew his complaint, bringing the dispute to a peaceful conclusion. The resolution allowed both parties to move forward while protecting their respective interests. But even before this, he had already formed a new world of music. Stay with us. A childhood filled with struggles. Richard Starkey, later known around the world as Ringo Starr, faced many difficult challenges from a very young age. Long before he became famous, his childhood was marked by serious illness, long hospital stays, and missed opportunities. Yet, these hard experiences eventually led him to discover the passion that would change his life forever. When Richard was only 6 years old, he developed appendicitis and had to undergo surgery. Sadly, complications followed, and he suffered from acute peritonitis, a severe condition that left him fighting for his life. The young boy fell into a deep coma that lasted for several days, causing great concern among the doctors caring for him. His recovery was slow and required a very long stay in the hospital. He spent 12 months at Myrtle Street Children's Hospital in Liverpool, away from his family and the normal life of a child. Because he was absent from school for such a long period, Richard fell far behind other children his age. When he finally returned home, he had missed an important part of his education. Reading and writing became difficult for him, and he struggled to keep up in class. By the age of 8, he was only beginning to rebuild his education. Fortunately, a kind neighbor patiently helped him learn the basics he had missed. With determination and support, he slowly improved and continued his schooling. Just as life seemed to be getting better, another serious challenge appeared. In 1953, shortly after turning 13, Richard became ill with tuberculosis during a widespread outbreak in the United Kingdom. The disease affected his lungs and forced him to leave his family once again. He was admitted to Heswall Sanatorium, where he would spend the next 2 years in treatment. Life inside the medical facility was lonely and very different from the busy world outside. Patients spent long periods resting in bed, and teachers were brought in to help them continue learning. During this time, Richard even learned how to knit. However, nothing captured his attention as much as music. One day, during a music lesson, a teacher handed out instruments to the children. By chance, Richard received a small drum. The moment he struck it, something powerful happened inside him. He felt an instant connection and excitement, unlike anything he had experienced before. From that day forward, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. His dream was simple but clear. He wanted to become a drummer. But this journey didn't start this way. It had a way more painful history. What was it like for Ringo? What isn't looking too good for him? Let's dive in. Richie Starkey. Richard Starkey, who would later become famous around the world as Ringo Starr, was born on the 7th of July 1940 in the Dingle area of Liverpool. He was the only child of Richard Starkey and Elsie Gleave, who worked as confectioners. His mother loved singing and dancing, and his father shared the same passion. Before their son arrived, the couple spent much of their free time enjoying music and dancing at local ballrooms. However, life changed after Richie's birth, and those happy outings became less frequent. As Richie grew older, family life became difficult. His mother was very protective and devoted to him, always watching over him with great care. At the same time, his father slowly became distant from the family. He spent more time in pubs, enjoying music, dancing and drinking, often staying away for long periods. The bond between father and son never had the chance to become strong. In 1944, the family moved to Admiral Grove, another part of the Dingle district, hoping to lower their living expenses. Soon after the move, Richie's parents separated and later divorced. His father played only a small role in his life after that. Years later, Richie admitted that he had very few memories of him because they rarely spent time together. Life was not easy for Elsie after the divorce. The small amount of money she received each week was not enough to support them comfortably. To provide for her son, she worked hard at different jobs, including cleaning houses. Eventually, she found steady work as a barmaid, a position she kept for many years. Despite the struggles, she remained determined to give her son the best life she could. Richie's childhood was also marked by serious health problems. Long periods of illness caused him to miss large parts of his education. By the age of 8, he could barely read and had difficulty with mathematics. Being behind in school made him feel different from other children. He often felt disconnected from his classmates and found it hard to fit in. Fortunately, help arrived through a caring neighbor named Marie Maguire Crawford. She spent time teaching and encouraging him. Through her patience and support, Richie slowly improved his reading and writing skills. Little by little, he began catching up with children his age. Just as things seemed to be improving, another challenge appeared. In 1953, he contracted tuberculosis and was admitted to a sanatorium for treatment. He remained there for 2 years. While the experience was difficult, it unexpectedly changed the direction of his life forever. The hospital staff encouraged patients to take part in activities to keep them active and lift their spirits. One of these activities involved music. Richie joined the hospital band and was introduced to percussion instruments. At first, He used a simple homemade mallet to tap on cabinets beside his bed. What began as a small activity quickly became a passion. The more he played, the more fascinated he became with drums. During his recovery, he received a copy of a drum-related song from Marie Crawford. The gift only increased his growing excitement. Family members later gave him instruments such as a mandolin, banjo, and harmonica. There was even a piano available, yet none of these instruments interested him. His heart belonged to the drums. From that point forward, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. Ritchie attended St. Silas Primary School, where classmates gave him the nickname Lazarus because of the many illnesses he had survived. Later, he moved on to Dingle Vale Secondary Modern School. Although academic subjects remained difficult because of the education he had missed, he showed talent in art, drama, and practical subjects such as mechanics. His lengthy hospital stays prevented him from keeping pace with other students. As a result, he was unable to take the important examination required for entry into a grammar school. After finally recovering from tuberculosis, he chose not to return to formal education. Instead, he spent much of his time at home listening to music and practicing rhythms by striking biscuit tins with sticks. A positive change came when his mother married Harry Graves in April 1954. Graves had moved from London to Liverpool and became an important figure in Ritchie's life. He loved big band music and introduced the young boy to recordings by several talented singers. More importantly, he treated Ritchie with kindness, patience, and respect. Their relationship was warm and supportive, and Ritchie later credited him with teaching him gentleness. Music continued to shape his world. He admired performers such as Lightnin' Hopkins, Ernest Tubb, and Hank Williams. Another major influence came when he watched drummer Gene Krupa perform in The Glenn Miller Story. Seeing the energy and excitement of drumming strengthened his desire to become a musician. After leaving the sanatorium in late 1955, Ritchie entered the working world. Finding stable employment was not easy. He briefly worked for the railway, receiving a suit and hat, but he was unable to pass the required physical examination and soon lost the job. The drum beat that changed everything. In 1953, Richard Starkey faced one of the most difficult periods of his young life. After contracting tuberculosis, he was admitted to a sanatorium, where he remained for 2 years. Separated from his family and the outside world, he spent his days within the walls of the medical facility. For a young boy, the experience was lonely and challenging, but it was also where his future began to take shape. The nurses and hospital staff looked for ways to keep patients active and positive during their long recovery. To help reduce boredom and encourage movement, they organized a hospital band. Richard became involved and was introduced to percussion instruments for the first time. Using simple drumsticks, he began tapping rhythms on the wooden cabinet beside his bed. What started as a small activity quickly became something much more important. From the moment he created those first beats, Richard felt a powerful connection to rhythm. Music gave him comfort during painful days and offered an escape from the difficulties surrounding him. The steady sound of drumming brought excitement into an otherwise quiet and restricted life. As the months passed, his interest grew stronger, and he became certain that music was what he wanted to pursue. When he finally left the sanatorium in 1955, he was determined to move forward. Although the effects of his illnesses still lingered, he was eager to build a future for himself. He found work as an apprentice at Henry Hunt & Son, a company that manufactured school equipment. While learning his trade, he saved money whenever possible. His greatest goal was to own a real drum kit, and eventually he earned enough to purchase his first professional set of drums. His love for music soon led him to perform with others. He joined a skiffle group called the Eddie Clayton Skiffle Group. The band gave him his first opportunities to play in front of audiences around Liverpool. These performances helped him gain confidence and experience while allowing local musicians to notice his talent. His strong sense of timing and reliable drumming style quickly earned respect among fellow performers. As his reputation grew, a major opportunity arrived. In 1959, he joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, one of the most popular bands in the Merseybeat scene. The move brought him greater exposure and introduced him to larger audiences. During this period, he adopted the stage name Ringo Starr. The nickname Ringo came from his habit of wearing several rings, while Starr became associated with the drum features that highlighted his performances. Years earlier, he had been a sick child fighting serious illnesses in hospital wards. Now he was becoming a respected musician with growing ambitions. The lonely days spent recovering had helped shape the determination and musical instinct that would later make him stand out. A life-changing moment arrived on the 14th of August, 1962. John Lennon invited Ringo Starr to join the Beatles, replacing drummer Pete Best. The timing was important because the band was preparing to take significant steps toward professional success. For Ringo, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. His introduction to the group, however, was far from easy. Only 4 days later, he appeared with the band at the Cavern Club. Some fans were unhappy about the change in drummers and strongly supported Pete Best. During the performance, many members of the audience expressed their disappointment, creating a tense atmosphere. For the new drummer, it was a difficult welcome. Another challenge followed soon after. In September of 1962, the Beatles entered Abbey Road Studios to record. Producer George Martin was uncertain about Ringo's abilities and chose to use session drummer Andy White during parts of the recording process. On the recording of Love Me Do, Ringo played a smaller role than expected. The experience was disappointing and tested his confidence during his earliest days with the group. Instead of giving up, he continued working hard and gradually proved his worth. Because he was naturally left-handed while using a right-handed drum kit, he developed a distinctive style of playing. This unusual approach helped create rhythms and transitions that became an important part of the Beatles' sound. His drumming added character and energy to many of the band's most celebrated recordings. As Beatlemania spread across the world during the 1960s, the band achieved extraordinary success. Yet life inside the group was not always easy. Over time, tensions developed, and disagreements became more frequent. During the recording sessions for the White Album in 1968, the atmosphere became especially difficult. Feeling overlooked and disconnected from the creative process, Ringo decided to leave the band temporarily. Seeking peace and space away from the pressure, he traveled to Sardinia. During this period, he found inspiration in the beauty of the sea and began developing ideas that would later become Octopus's Garden, one of his best-known compositions. His absence quickly revealed how important he was to the group. The remaining members realized that the band was missing a vital presence. Wanting him back, they reached out with messages and flowers. When Ringo returned to the studio, he found his drum kit decorated with flowers as a warm gesture of welcome. The moment reflected something many people had come to understand. Beyond his talent as a drummer, Ringo Starr brought balance and unity to the group. His steady nature helped hold together four remarkable musicians, proving that sometimes the quietest person can become the strongest connection of all. But solving other people's issues and ignoring yours isn't worth it. How? Stay with us. Finding lasting happiness. While Ringo Starr became famous for his music, his personal life experienced many ups and downs over the years. Behind the success, the applause, and the worldwide fame, he faced relationship struggles, family challenges, and emotional moments that shaped his journey. Ringo's first serious love story began with Maureen Cox. The two met at the Cavern Club in Liverpool during the early days of the Beatles. At the time, Maureen was a young hairdresser, and Ringo had recently joined the band. Their connection grew quickly, and they soon became one of the most talked-about couples around the group. A few years later, they married. Together, they built a family and welcomed 3 children: Zach, Jason, and Lee. For a time, they appeared to have the happy family life many people admired. However, life inside the marriage was far more complicated than it seemed from the outside. As the Beatles became one of the biggest bands in the world, The pressures of fame affected every part of Ringo's life. Constant attention, busy schedules, and personal insecurities created difficulties within the relationship. Maureen later revealed that Ringo often needed reassurance and emotional support. He worried deeply about losing the people he loved, and sometimes struggled with feelings of self-doubt. Everything became even more difficult after the Beatles broke up in 1970. The end of the band was a painful experience for Ringo. He found it hard to cope with the sudden change and turned to alcohol during that period of his life. The problems that followed placed heavy strain on his marriage and family. Over time, the relationship between Ringo and Maureen continued to weaken. Their marriage eventually ended in 1975 after several years of growing difficulties. Reports later connected the breakup to Maureen's relationship with George Harrison, Ringo's fellow Beatles bandmate. Although details surrounding the situation remained largely private, the story became one of the most discussed personal episodes involving members of the group. The situation also affected George Harrison's marriage to Pattie Boyd. In later years, Boyd described the relationship between George and Maureen as a painful chapter that contributed to the breakdown of her own marriage. The events created tension among people who had once shared close friendships. Despite the end of their marriage, Maureen continued building her own life. She later married Isaac Tegret, the founder of the Hard Rock Cafe chain. Together, they welcomed a daughter named Augusta. While her life moved in a new direction, she remained an important part of the lives of her children and those who cared about her. Sadly, tragedy struck when Maureen passed away from complications related to leukemia in 1994 at the age of 47. Her passing deeply affected many people who had known her throughout the years. Paul McCartney later honored her memory through his music, creating a song that reflected the affection and respect he felt for her and her family. After the heartbreak and challenges of his first marriage, Ringo eventually found love again. His second great love story began with actress Barbara Bach. The two first crossed paths at Los Angeles International Airport. The meeting left a strong impression on Ringo, but their relationship truly developed later when they worked together on the film Caveman in 1980. Their connection quickly grew stronger, and less than a year later, they married. What followed was a relationship that stood the test of time. In a world where celebrity marriages often end quickly, Ringo and Barbara built a lasting partnership based on love, loyalty, and friendship. The man who held the Beatles together. As the Beatles moved toward their final years, tensions inside the band became harder to ignore. During the recording of the Let It Be project in 1969, disagreements between members grew stronger. While others clashed over creative decisions and personal differences, Ringo Starr quietly worked to keep peace within the group. He often acted as a calming presence, helping to ease conflicts and keep the band focused on finishing their work. His role went far beyond playing drums. Ringo became the steady force that helped hold together four very different personalities. While audiences saw the music and success, few realized how much patience and understanding he brought to the group during its most difficult moments. Years later, Ringo reflected on his place within the Beatles. He explained that his greatest strength was not trying to be the most celebrated drummer. Instead, it was his ability to stay calm and work alongside the powerful personalities that surrounded him. Many fans had long believed this was true. Ringo was not simply a member of the band. He was the link that helped keep everything connected during years of pressure and change. When the Beatles officially came to an end in 1970, a major chapter of his life closed. The smiling drummer who had spent years supporting the group suddenly faced a future filled with uncertainty. Although the band was gone, Ringo quickly found success as a solo artist. In 1973, he released the album Ringo, which became one of the most successful projects of his career. The record achieved impressive commercial success and featured contributions from all three of his former bandmates. Popular songs from the album helped him reach new heights and proved that he could shine outside the shadow of the Beatles. Despite his achievements, personal struggles slowly began to emerge. The pressure of fame, expectations, and major life changes weighed heavily on him. Then, in December 1980, tragedy struck when John Lennon was killed in New York City. The devastating news deeply affected Ringo. He immediately traveled to support Yoko Ono during an incredibly painful time. The loss left a lasting emotional wound. In the years that followed, Ringo battled serious problems with alcohol and substance abuse. His health, personal life, and emotional well-being suffered greatly. The situation became so severe that many feared he was losing control of his future. Everything changed in 1988. Realizing that he could no longer continue down such a destructive path, Ringo made a life-changing decision. Together with his wife, Barbara Bach, he entered the Betty Ford Center for treatment. The process was difficult and demanded honesty, strength, and determination. After completing treatment, he committed himself to a healthier life. He gave up alcohol and cigarettes and focused on rebuilding both his health and personal happiness. This turning point became one of the most important moments of his life. And yet life still threw challenges at him. Stick around. A life guided by music. At the age of 48, Ringo Starr reached a turning point that transformed the rest of his life. After overcoming years of personal struggles, he emerged with a renewed outlook and a stronger sense of purpose. Rather than looking back at difficult chapters, he chose to focus on growth, happiness, and the healing power of music. That decision became the foundation for the remarkable life and career that followed. In 1989, Ringo launched one of the most successful projects of his later years by creating the All-Star Band. Unlike traditional groups, this band followed a unique idea. It brought together respected musicians from different legendary acts and allowed each performer to share the spotlight. Every member could perform their own well-known songs, while Ringo provided the steady rhythm behind them. The concept quickly became a success. Audiences loved seeing talented artists perform together on one stage, creating an atmosphere filled with celebration rather than competition. For Ringo, the project offered something even more valuable. It allowed him to continue making music without the pressure of trying to dominate charts or prove himself against others. He simply focused on sharing great performances and connecting with fans. Over the years, many musicians joined and departed the All-Star Band, but its spirit never changed. The group remained a symbol of friendship, respect, and collaboration. Decade after decade, Ringo carried the project forward with the same enthusiasm that had inspired him as a young drummer. Another important chapter began in 2008, when he introduced a message that would become closely connected to his public image. Beginning with his 68th birthday, Ringo encouraged people around the world to come together every year on the 7th of July at noon. He invited them to share a simple message centered on peace and love. For him, this was much more than a yearly tradition. It reflected a personal belief that kindness, understanding, and positivity could help people face life's challenges. The message became one of the most recognizable parts of his later career and was embraced by fans across many countries. His dedication to music and positive influence continued to earn recognition. In 2015, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist. The honor highlighted the impact he had achieved outside of the Beatles and confirmed that his individual contributions to music were significant in their own right. 3 years later, another major honor arrived. In 2018, he was knighted by the British royal family. At Buckingham Palace, Sir Richard Starkey received recognition for his contributions to music and charitable causes. The moment represented a proud milestone in a journey that had begun decades earlier in Liverpool. When the global pandemic disrupted everyday life in 2020, many performers were forced to stop touring and recording. Ringo adapted quickly by embracing technology and finding new ways to stay connected with audiences. Through virtual performances and new music releases, he continued sharing encouragement during a difficult period for many people. Projects such as Zoom In and Change the World reflected his belief that music could bring comfort, hope, and connection. even when people were physically separated. His positive outlook remained unchanged despite the challenges facing the world. As he entered his 9th decade of life, Ringo showed no signs of slowing down. He continued releasing music and maintaining an impressive level of creativity and energy. In 2023, he participated in the completion of Now and Then, a Beatles project that used modern technology to restore John Lennon's vocal recording. For Ringo, hearing his friend's voice once again was a deeply meaningful experience. The following years brought even more achievements. In 2025, he released Look Up, his first country music album in many decades. The project earned strong praise and demonstrated that his passion for exploring new musical directions remained alive. By 2026, he continued creating music, collaborating with respected artists, and performing with the All-Star Band. Despite his age, his energy on stage continued to impress audiences around the world. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.